Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to help you get the Zettelkasten of your dreams on your work table beside you. Well, this is the conclusion of the extended example that we've been doing of the Adler's How to Read a Book, doing analytical reading on the book of your choice. My book has been Hold On, You Lost Me, How to Use Learning Styles to Create Training That Sticks by Bernice McCarthy and Janine O'Neill Blackwell. Well, the fun thing about this closing episode is the amount of time it has been between step 7 and step 8. And the reason for that gap has been a mini-series on creating a Zettelkasten vision box. Well, that mini-series was performing the steps necessary to get to this step in the Adler process. As you might recall from an earlier episode, when you're reading a how-to book, the truth of the book has to be proven by giving the thing a try. And so I attempted to create a lesson plan following all 4 stages, all 8 steps of McCarthy's format learning cycle. Because my episodes are fairly short, I divided the stages into one video for each, 2 steps each video. And tonight I'm going to share with you my cards that I used for my lesson plan and some evaluation as to how it went. So come on over to the down-facing camera with me and we will conclude this Adler series. Hey, here we are in our familiar bib cards on a ring. How to Read a Book by Adler, and we have gone through all of the steps in analytical reading, except for this last one. Which problems did the author solve, which not? Did the author know it or not? In other words, this is the step where we ask if the book is true. If you're wondering what's all behind here in the way of cards, this is Adler's syntopical reading, where you're reading more than one book at a time, or now that you have a Zettelkasten, you can read syntopically into your Zettelkasten, and you only have to physically read one book at a time. But that isn't the topic today. Instead, we're going to stay with how do you determine the truth of a how-to book, which is, did you try it out? Did it work for you? Does it seem like it has a chance of working for you? And we are also very deeply involved at this time in the extra steps that Julianne Scherer offered, which is, promise does the author make about the value that's only delivered by doing the extraordinary measure of stepping away from the book and doing as the author tells you to do. In this regard, Julianne has anticipated step 8 for a how-to book from Adler's methods. But she offers another question as well that needs to go into the analysis this evening, and that is, does the author persuade you to make the beyond reading effort through which you earn the right to criticize the book fairly? Did the author become an ineffectual nag, or did she help you recognize something in your wing, making space for it in your rudder, and by the end, pull it into your anchor? All of these terms, wing, rudder, and anchor, refer to my work on the character traits. So if those seem a bit unfamiliar to you, basically what it's saying is, did it move from something you'd kind of like to do someday, sort of, into something that you're actually making a decision to deal with now, and that in the future you're going to make into a practice? And she's asking the overarching question, did the author succeed in getting me to do it? Well, the answer to that one is a solid yes. And here are all the cards that I made to create the lesson plan for those 4 lessons. Let me explain. Okay, here in chapter 5, Bernice McCarthy encourages you very strongly to design your own training plan, and she devotes a whole chapter to how to actually build out your format model lesson plan. So here's mine. Step 1 in the format model is engage. It's where you try to answer the question why. For type 1 learners, this is their favorite area to be in. These 2 steps steps 1 and 2 are both in the quadrant that bears the same name as this first step, the engage quadrant, where you get the participants interested in the material you are covering. That was my episode, Why Might You Want a Dream Box for Zettelkasten? And I addressed this question to each of my types of learners individually. I know that my type 1 learners, their principal question is why, and so I addressed the why question for them as the starting point. Next, I addressed engage for the type 2 learners whose major question is what. And so I tried to engage them with a preview of a what type of a question. If you had a vision box sitting on your desk, what would it look like? Just to get them to imagine the concept of having a Zettelkasten, a vision box, but to imagine it in terms of their favorite question, which is what. My type 3 learners have a favorite question of how. How do you do it? And so the question that I wanted to engage them with is, how's this going to come into being? Kind of tease them with the idea of thinking that, if you had some ideas that start flying at you in very, very different and random ways, how can you capture them? How can you gather them in a way that you can make them useful? So I'm trying to do the engage, but through the how question. Finally, for my type 4 learners, for the engage step, I wanted to tease them with the idea that if you had a mechanism for capturing all of these visionary and wild ideas, what other things might you want to use it for? Because that's their question, is what if, and how could you go beyond this? What else could you do with this same kind of information? So now I have attempted to individually engage each of my types of learners in that very first step. Now, step 2 is still in that first quadrant. It's called attend, and the idea of this is that if you had a live group, what you would have them do is just get a good discussion going in step 1, and then in step 2, you'd have them think about the discussion. You'd have them analyze the discussion. So they're supposed to take a look back at step 1 and think about it. And because I don't have them live, the best way that I could adapt to that was to have them think back on the thoughts that they had going through step 1 and ask them, based on what you've seen and heard so far, are you likely to want to try this out? And which question caught your attention the most? Because I'm trying to get them thinking also about how they think about a vision box. I invited them to share their thoughts in the comments. I received way more comments than I normally get on this video. If you're interested, you can go back and look at them yourself. And I was excited to see the different comments that I got also showed me that people of different learning styles were actually engaged. I was really surprised at getting all of those comments, because I felt when I was done presenting this stage that I had given them nothing. It was just questions. And I felt like, well, now that was a mighty empty video. And then to get such positive responses from it really surprised me. Well, steps 3 and 4 come in the next quadrant, which is called the share quadrant. And this is the quadrant where you're supposed to actually get the expert information out there. So this was my opportunity to really kind of get in there and teach it. But again, I tried at each step in this process to engage the individual learners of each different type so that I could pull them into the material about what the Zettelkasten box is all about in a way that I hoped would affect them individually. And this was at the level of the image, the diagram, the pictorial. And then I combined all of them together when I went through what the vision box really looked like, what were the cards like, and how much it functioned similarly to the way that a regular Zettelkasten functions. Okay. In the same way, I worked on steps 5 and 6, 7 and 8, and completed my lesson plan through all 4 stages. I must confess that the whole process was very uncomfortable for me. The only stage at all that I felt comfortable presenting was the how-to stage, which obviously showed me that that is my preferred question. I felt much more comfortable telling people, how do you build one of these boxes? But even then, I felt that it was so scrunched by having to put all of that meat, to me, the whole of the mini course, the whole of the mini series had to get packed into one little segment, that I felt like I was really rushed, even in the part where I was presenting from my own strength. So that is why I was so surprised to see that the videos received a lot of comment and a lot of likes. So that tells me that my best bet at this point is probably not to run back to my little corner and teach only to people who like the how-to method, but really to spend a little bit of time with each learning type and with each step in the learning cycle, so that I don't completely leave the other three quadrants out. It would be hard for me, I think, to make it a regular practice to divide up the time between the four quadrants. So it's fascinating to me also that the book talks a lot about this little icon they use, two hands and like a rubber band between the two hands for stretch. And it really was a stretch for me. So now I really am going to need to get feedback from the rest of you on how did this series, the mini series on the Dreambox, compare to how I teach more naturally, which is this series on the Adler. I would love to get feedback in terms of how did the two different approaches feel to you, what felt more natural to you as a learner, and just share with me what you thought. I thought it was a fascinating opportunity to use Adler's method, and I just used it again today to read Mel Jeffcoat's latest newsletter, his using the analytical method, and I am really sold on the value of analytical reading. So I hope you are too, and I hope you've either followed along if that's your learning style, or if it's more your learning style to just watch the whole thing and then try it, I hope you will try it. And if your style is to take something beyond it, then I hope you took it and found a way to adapt it for just the person that you are. And in any case, thank you for following along in this mini-series. See you next time. Bye-bye.